friends.
Yeah, I got down to 68. I don't know, is it? It was like on 71 when I came in. Is it the output or something? Or?
This computer went to sleep.
Oh, so it's probably what the settings are then after a certain amount.
I'll update those. Jason, can I get you to sign it?
Yeah. We got a little while because we're not going to be talking about this for.
Okay.
You don't have to.
I can update the power setting so it doesn't do that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I know. She's on top.
I'm well, how are you? Good. How are you? I like that lighting. I'll show you the Tennessee High.
How are you?
How are you doing?
Good. Good to see you. Are you in Tennessee?
My father owns a cell phone for like 20 years down there.
Oh, is that right?
So he's got bow ties, and shirts. Yeah.
So Tennessee High is Tennessee High is Bristol, Virginia. Bristol, Tennessee, and then Virginia High is Bristol. Is the Tennessee High High School all city limits? Or is it?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So there's
Much bigger. Yeah.
Right.
It's a big school. That's where my wife went.
well, that's
To the it's gonna be good. September the 18th public session of the Abingdon Town Council. We appreciate all of you showing up and participating in our government. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bradley.
Here.
Ms. Quetch. Here. Mr. Webb.
here.
Ms. Patterson. Here. Mayor Craig.
Here. Council, we received a communication from the county just recently. So with your permission, I'm going to move that to a closed session at the end of the meeting. And I'm going to move, Mr. Rose is here to give us a report, and he's traveling under unfinished business. I'm going to move that after the first item to be discussed. With the council's permission, is it okay with you, Al? Cindy? Kim, let the record show that the revision in the agenda, and all council members were in favor of it.
And we
Excuse me.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
I apologize, I didn't see where to sign up for public comment, and I would like to make public comment.
Oh, sure, you
That's-
can, you don't need to be signed up. Come on up, Bruce.
Whenever you're ready. You ready now?
Yeah, come on up. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak this afternoon. My name is Lucy Phillips, and as you all know, I'm the county attorney, and I'm making these comments as representative of the Washington County government. When you campaigned for election to town council, many of you emphasized the importance you place on openness of government. But recent events indicate that you may be losing touch with your earlier concerns about that openness. For instance, neither the county nor town center were notified that their joint application for revision of the zoning ordinance was a topic on the agenda for this afternoon. And we have not been notified as to whether it's a topic on the agenda for the September meeting or September commission meeting or October council meeting. It's all just been done without any communication with the very applicants for that zoning amendment. And even if it's not on the published agenda, there's some question whether it might be added as a last-minute item as an amended agenda item without notice to the applicants. Another example along those lines is that no advance notice was given of the town manager's intent to propose to the Planning Commission and to the Town Council that Section 17-4 of the Town Code be repealed. For both the Commission and the Council, that item was a last-minute amendment to the agendas with no advance notice to the public. Added at the last minute and rushed through after the county and town center application was filed. The timing clearly indicates an intent to block the county and town center application from even being considered by the Planning Commission and the Town Council. It is interesting that the town manager wishes not only to block the commission and council from opportunity to consider the application for a legislative amendment, but he has also stated numerous times his certainty of what the council's future zoning legislation will be on this matter. I have personally witnessed him stating that the council will not allow courthouse operations to be moved to the town center, and he has been quoted in the newspaper making the same statement. The decision whether to amend the town's zoning ordinance is a legislative decision which has not been fully considered by the town's legislative body, which is you. Certainly it has not been considered in a context that has given the county and town center the opportunity to discuss the proposal with the town as would be appropriate for a legislative decision. Section 17-4 allows such a discussion to occur. Maybe the council's decision will be consistent with the town manager's prophecy, but it leaves a question as to who is making the legislative decisions that are assigned to you, the elected officials, to make. All of you, as a council, not just individuals making comments to other individuals outside of the legislative context. And back to the trend of a lack of openness. The recommendation that Section 17-4 be repealed is still another reflection of the town's trend toward excluding the people from the legislative process. The town manager and the town attorney have asserted that Section 17-4 procedure, which allows a property owner to request a revision of the town's zoning ordinance, is beyond the scope of authority of the town, a violation of the Dillon Rule for the town. Can any one of you really accept that it's beyond the scope of the town's authority to receive requests for changes in the town's zoning law from its own citizens? Citizen involvement in the legislative process is part of the bedrock of democracy. And Section 17-4 simply established a procedure by which such requests can be treated in a uniform manner. Any property owner can make that request to the town, and any property owner would be treated equally as that section is currently written. As explained in the correspondence that I've provided to you today, the section would benefit from revision to clarify that once the Commission and the Council have reviewed an application for amendment, the Council would decide whether to initiate the process for adoption of an ordinance to amend the town's zoning ordinance. Such process requires public notice and opportunity for citizen comment in a public hearing. As you all know, you do that often. Section 17-4 as currently written does not reference the need for a public notice and public hearings, but that deficiency can be easily corrected by revision rather than total repeal. Most likely, the ordinance that was adopted to establish 17-4 as an amendment at the time to the town's zoning ordinance, included a survival clause, which stated that if any part of the ordinance was deemed inconsistent with law, the other provisions that are not inconsistent with the law would remain in effect. Finally, today, you will consider whether to allow the commission to consider the county and town center application for a zoning text amendment. Remember, section 17.4 is still in effect. Town council has not taken action to repeal it, and the application is currently pending with the town. The town has clear authority to consider the town center and county application without violating state law. As a property owner in the town center deserves fair consideration of its application, as does the county. Even if the outcome does not favor the application, going through the process of review and public comment will reflect the town's council's commitment to public participation and openness. Please maintain your campaign promises regarding openness in government and welcoming citizen participation, and simply revise section 17.4 to correct its conflict with state law. It is not necessary to repeal it entirely. And in the correspondence that I've distributed to you all earlier before the meeting started, there's a more thorough legal explanation of 17.4 and how it can be revised without throwing it out altogether, and why it is written, and the opportunity for citizens to request changes to the law is not a violation of the Dillon Rule. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Rose.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Pleasure to be here again. I understand you may have on your various pieces my information, but I made a lot of other copies as well for other people that may be here in the audience as well as we all. So if you don't mind, I can just pass this around. I see you already made copies.
I think you've got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we made plenty of copies. We didn't get bounded ones.
Okay. All right, I'll just leave these here for anybody and everybody. So there you go. So again, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'm David Rose, as you know, and look forward to just giving you a brief summary result of the bids that we got in from the various banks. So a couple things to say here. If you go to page 1, you may recall that you gave us the go-ahead back in August to competitively bid out for the funding, with the idea that interest rates are very favorable and were considerably lower, we had hoped, than where we had estimated. Just to give you a sense of that, we had estimated an interest rate of 4.25%, and we were hoping to beat that. And the good news here is, I'll jump to the chase, we ended up getting and recommending to you an interest rate of 2.89% fixed for the entire term. And just to give you a sense of that, Mr. Mayor and everyone else, that is about $1.5 million of interest avoided.
Wow.
So we feel very good about that, and you're going to see what that looks like. The other thing we feel very good about is the number of bids you got. 8 different banking institutions responded. You can see there on number 1, banking institutions as far away as New York, all over the country, local. And it's said to us that they are very comfortable with the way you manage your finances. So I think that's something. I will tell you, I had an instance a few weeks ago, actually a week ago, where another locality, not near here, only got 2 bids on something of almost an identical size, and we had to tell them that part of that was they were running structural imbalances. That's not been your situation. You're very much balanced, and you've done the things you need to do. So, having said that, again, I think you could take heart in knowing lots of different banking institutions are interested in you, and they're very busy right now because, again, interest rates are so low, they're very busy. So with that said, on page 2, of the 8 responses, 5 of them were willing to do what we really wanted them to do, which was to fix the interest rate for the entire term. And what that does on page 2 is to let us know exactly what the interest and the principal is going to be on this borrowing. So with that said, number 1 ranked is Sterling National Bank, and that's again a national bank. They have offices all over the country. They're out of New York. We do business with them in Ohio. We do business with them certainly in Virginia, but they've got a very significant presence out of the Ohio markets as well. And so they have said that they will fix it. We are in the final stages of making sure that they are good with regard to their credit, but we don't see a problem there. Should one arise, then the backup is First Bank and Trust, much more local, and they're at 3.18%. Again, all 5 of these were considerably below the estimated rates that we had set about a year ago. And if you recall, the reason we set it higher, estimated higher, is we wanted to make sure we didn't get caught short, but also at that time, they were talking about raising, the Fed was raising rates. At this time, looking into the end of the calendar year last year, and they did raise rates. And so we've taken advantage of the fact that it's gone the opposite way. Rates have been lowered, and as we speak, the Federal Reserve will find out in just a few hours or a day or so what they're going to ultimately do in their 2-day meetings if they further reduce rates. My sense is that these rates have already built in, again, the fact that the rates are very favorable. So we don't see that changing, and if indeed you approve this, that will be locked in no matter what the markets do over the next couple of weeks. So I'll give you a little bit of time frame. So we will not have that, we'll call it interest rate risk, if we do that. So if you go to page 3, this is really where we see that benefit. And so by fiscal year, on that $7.5 million, we had a planning model of 4.25%. And you could see there in years 21 and fiscal year 22, there was about $380,000 and about $320,000. Instead, by virtue of that rate becoming so much less, we're actually going to find that the payments that we have to make are $123,000 less than we estimated, and a little over $100,000 less the following year. That's really critical, I think you would understand, because again, as you're in that startup mode with all these things that are starting to come online, that just gives all of us that much more cushion in terms of what might happen. So we're particularly delighted. And then, starting when the full principal and interest gets paid in 2023, you'll notice it's about $65,000 less per year for all the remaining years. So this puts us in a mode where, number 1, we've saved about $1.5 million of interest. But the other thing we like about it is that we're able to prepay this without penalty after just 5 years. So we have like a 5-year lockout as things are getting, in effect, built out, as we can see how the project works. But let's say for whatever reason, we feel like we need to do something dramatic about restructuring this debt, we get that ability to do that without penalty. And we like that. And that was very important to us. So we've got that as well with the bank proposal. So with all of that being said, on page 4 is just a schedule. Here we are today on the 18th. We'd like to ask you to formally say yes to this, but in reality, we will need you sometime next month to do the actual approval once the documents that the bank puts together with your attorney as well as with the bond attorney, when they put it all together, we'll be back, or they'll be back, just to ask you to formally approve it. But we'd like you to say yes today so everybody can start pulling those documents together, and then we need to just close that by the end of October. But this rate is being held to the end of October. So that's the important thing. So we know what we have right now with certainty. As I said, if for some unexpected reason that bank turns around and says no to the credit, don't think it's going to happen, but I have to say that, just anything could happen, we'll go through the backup bank, which is, again, not quite as good, but very, very solid. So that's really all I had Members of council, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, council?
When does the first payment start?
So the first payment is going to start, let me go back to that page. Let me go back, all right, and we've got, let's see, okay. So the first payment's going to start in fiscal year '21, okay? And you can see there that you have a $260,000 payment that fiscal year. But we also have it reflected here that we're going to spend some of those monies, we'll reimburse ourselves for some of those monies, but more than likely, we're not going to spend all of that immediately come, again, effectively November 1st. So we're going to earn some interest that we have not counted and factored into that. So we're going to actually end up, our payments will probably be lower than that, but we're not counting it that way.
Okay.
So that's what it's going to work.
Usually the way these are done, they'll have an interest payment and a principal payment at 2 different times of the year.
That's right. And we will not have principal for basically 2 years while the project is coming online. So if you may recall in some of the last meetings that I had with y'all, we showed the cash flows and made sure we had enough buffer by virtue of what's expected to come online as early as, let's say, this October or so, and then we discounted those dollars. Because anything that comes online, if you think about it, between, let's say, November and the end of June, that's in fiscal year '20. And we're not counting that. We have no payment in fiscal year '20. So it's not until next fiscal year, which would be presumably a full year of income coming in, that we're going to have a partial payment of that roughly, I'm rounding off, 250,000.
Yeah, and by that point, we'll have at least a minimum of 6 months of sales, or meals tax and sales tax receipts for
Yes.
whatever businesses we're opening in the Meadows.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we purposely set that up so that there would not be a problem when the '21 fiscal year gets discussed with regard to, you know, your overall budgets. That'll be happening in a few months. We set it up so that these dollars are the new incremental separate from the, we'll call it your recurring revenues that you have in the town. That's how we set that up.
So at the earliest, in other words, July 1, 2020 would be when the payment schedule would start?
Yes, so July 1,
Of next fiscal year.
yes, exactly.
2021
Which is the 2021 fiscal year. That's exactly right, Ken. Yes, sir.
So probably December 2020 or June 2021-ish.
Exactly.
Mr. Rose, you indicated we would need to act on this, and
Well, I think you technically, you really need to act on this at one of the meetings in October, but we would like you to, I think the bank and everyone would like you to, if you can, give us that
Recommendation
that
to
you're
proceed to move
comfortable
forward so they
proceeding.
can
Yes, sir.
prepare.
Today?
Yeah, just that we're comfortable with this rate and that we will
Oh, yeah.
authorize them to proceed with preparing the documentation
okay.
for the course.
Derek, you all right with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cindy?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
I'm okay. Our regular meeting is on the 1st of October, is that right, Kim?
Yes, sir.
Would that be
It
all right
does.
if
We
we
worked,
place it
we've
on the
talked to
agenda?
both the bank, and we've talked to bank, and we talked to bond counsel in the last day or so, and they've both given us that comfort that they can meet that. So we'll see. Hopefully they'll follow through, but that's the goal.
Okay, we'll place that on the, with the council permission, we'll place it on the October 1st agenda, and we have a work session on the 16th that we can act. We prefer not to act in the work session, but for your information, we can.
Because I had that as a 6:30 meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
You know, like I said, and if for some reason they just can't get it together, then the 16th will be the backup, and that's not a problem. I don't see that as a problem either, but just might as well push it and see what we get.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate you, man.
David saved us money every time he's been here. He's gonna have to save us money the next
Yeah, I
time.
know. I wish you could save us some money.
Better lucky than smart.
Lawyers only create
costs.
Thank you very much for your hard work, Mr. Rose. I appreciate
It's
it.
hard to quantify.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, the next item is discussion regarding Washington Crossing subdivision. Mr. Boswell.
You missed one, D1.
Hmm?
D1.
You skipped me on purpose?
D1.
We moved that.
He moved it to the end, I think he wants to move it to the end.
That's in the closed session, yeah, that's gonna be in the closed session. We'll discuss it, what we need to in open session, but we're gonna hold a closed session first.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Can you switch this over to the plat?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Can you all see that? For the most part. Well, better. Can't get it too big or be off the screen. Thank you, Mayor Craig and honorable council. Just an opportunity to discuss the Washington Crossings preliminary plat. The planning commission voted unanimously to approve the preliminary plat at the August 26th meeting. There were some concerns raised at the meeting by the planning commission and staff as to the increased traffic impact for the development. The developer provided an opinion letter, which you should have in front of you, from C.M. Smith, engineering firm out of Knoxville, in regards to those concerns. The opinion shows that a trip reduction of approximately 70 to 85% from the current shopping center use to a 98-room hotel use. The Planning Commission ultimately voted to approve the plat without any other concerns raised.
Okay, council, any questions?
Okay, before we get into the council, can I also talk about this?
Sure.
Working on, if you don't mind now.
It's your show.
So behind, staff has been working with the developer on some of the concerns that we had about what's gonna happen to the entrance. You don't have a laser pointer, do you? You do? Yeah, I guess. Okay, so this right here is Cummings, and this is a private entrance, as you know, and is this Black Forest right there? Is that it right there? Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
And the proposed connector road, I guess it was called, is somewhere around here, right? Ish, over to the left over here, okay. So as you know, we have not yet been able to acquire any right-of-way for this, and as it stands now, kind of in a holding pattern. But the concern was, if this were to get subdivided, this parcel, the parcel lines divide this entrance right here. And so if this parcel is sold off, this is owned by the new owner, the Hampton Inn. And then if this one turns into parcel number 2, let's say, or lot number 2, it's in a different ownership. It's owned by Marathon. The concern is if this connector road eventually were to go in, trying to get this to be a public roadway to connect Green Spring Road or Cook Street Extension to Green Spring Road, to eliminate any concerns about traffic taking left-hand turns southbound on Cummings. As it stands now, staff is not, we really can't oppose, or our opinion is that the council can't really tell the developer, well, or the property owner, you can't divide the property this way. We don't have, this is not, I'm not gonna say this is best planning practice, because flag lots are really discouraged, but the only way we can refuse a flag lot is if it's done to meet the, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, to meet the area requirements of the lot.
Yes, sir.
So therefore, we can't deny this plat because they don't want to put that as a public road. So one solution that we came up with, staff and talking to Cam, we basically decided there's a way we can get this eventually improved into a road, and if and when that connector road is built, that's the ideal situation. So instead, a lot of times when these roads are platted, they're done during the subdivision process. That's not going to happen here. So we discussed with the developer the possibility of having it dedicated at a later date so the town wouldn't have to go back later and acquire it. And what we've tried to do is come to an agreement on if and when that connector road was acquired, or the right-of-way was acquired, or it was constructed by the new developer. Anything's possible. I know we had previously tried to pursue that. That the right-of-way for that entrance that is now, I guess we'll call it the Washington Crossings Shopping Center entrance, that would then be dedicated as right-of-way, so the town could pursue potential grant opportunities with, which we can actually do now prior to right-of-way acquisition, to improve that entire roadway and to connect Green Spring Road, or the Cook Street extension, whatever you want to call it, to Cumming Street. We've had a couple different drafts go back and forth, and I will pass this out, and it's just a draft, but it basically, and it might be tweaked a little bit further, but I just wanted to read you 2 paragraphs, because really, that's the summary of what we're trying to do here. And I could tell you that we're hoping to do this in conjunction with the plat approval to alleviate any concerns about potentially acquiring the right-of-way in the future to make that a public roadway. In the event, and this is the 2 paragraphs I'm going to read, in the event a connector road is ever constructed or dedicated as a public right-of-way, to the town between what is commonly known and referred to as Cook Street Extended and the Marathon property, the road, Marathon shall dedicate to the town a public right-of-way in the area and located in location depicted on Exhibit A. And there'll be an exhibit that shows that potential roadway, which is called the easement area. If the conditions in paragraph 1 or above are met, then the town shall facilitate construction of a public road within the easement area, which would be this right here, in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations then existing, using, in the town's sole discretion, available third-party funds or available town funds in conjunction with available third-party funds. And the main reason for that, including that language in there, is that we want to make sure that you're aware of that we're not using 100% town funds for that. We've had some very productive conversations with the VDOT. Me, Tyler, and Mike Surratt were there a couple days ago for smart scale project discussion, and we talked about this project as well as a few others, and it was looked very favorably upon. So whether it's third-party money from a developer, whether it's VDOT money, that's what the town's trying to accomplish here. So I just wanted you to be aware that this is hopefully will become a reality, and we'll be able to get something in conjunction with this subdivision plat. So if and when this gets subdivided, the town really has an attractive project for VDOT. Which the problem with smart scale is that it's a 6-year timeline. So the hope is there's a couple other grant programs through VDOT that might be available sooner, which still would provide a significant amount of funding. So, but that's all I had to say, unless anybody had any questions about that. But like I said, this is just a draft form, and I can give it to whoever wants a copy. But if anybody has any questions or comments about it, feel free to ask. I think I could. Yeah, get rid of it.
I'm here to answer any questions
Yeah.
from the development
Yeah.
side.
Mr. Spangler, what kind of time frame do you know about for the Hampton Inn?
We're currently under contract with the Hampton Inn. They are waiting for their closing with VDOT, which I think is imminent, so I think they're looking within the next 30 to 60 days to close. It's important to them to get this done and then get their project started, so they have as least amount of downtime between when they have to close their existing hotel and when they open their new hotel.
So it'll be a year or so before?
Yeah, I think a construction on that type of project's anywhere from 12 to 16 months. But I think part of their negotiation with VDOT, and I don't know this, I just, that they got to maintain their current operation longer than what is typical.
Thank you.
Yeah, we wouldn't probably expect to see the Hampton Inn operational until 2021, the year 2021.
Yeah, and I just to kind of recap what I discussed at the planning commission meeting, part of the contract with the Hampton Inn is for us to also improve the retained portion of the property, which is what we would retain, which is the ABC and some of those shops. So there'll be some facade upgrades, parking lot upgrades to kind of make it a cohesive development when their hotel comes online. But one thing that we can't do is why we, provided the letter from our traffic engineer, is we can't really cut our nose off to spite our face and go through with the subdivision and then have our access impeded. If there's any kind of movement to, because of this development or because of this subdivision to alter the current access, then we would just take it off the table, because we've got current tenants that we have to account for. But to Mr. Morani's point, we're fully fine and on board with the development agreement, that if the road is ever funded and constructed, then in conjunction with that, we would dedicate the right of way. Then at that time, once it's operational, we'll be okay with altering the existing entry if that makes sense.
Ultimately, of course, as you know, if all of that gets, and there are lots of moving parts for that end result, but it solves a 30-year-old problem with that entrance. And the main problem is that what would be a public road is just a parking lot right now. And as Jimmy said, we can't really, they've subdivided it consistent with the rules, but we're getting something in exchange for future planning that's going to benefit everybody.
Yeah, there's no requirement that they enter this agreement. We can't make approval of the plat contingent upon this, but I think it benefits both parties, because certainly they would want to see the road improved.
Yeah.
And we don't want to deal with two different property owners later on, because once it gets subdivided, this would run with the land.
And to that point, there's no requirement that you ever build the road. I think we just
Right.
want some assurances, and as does the Hampton Inn, that until that's built, that we have a full access. That's-
Stephen, the agreement doesn't say the width of the right-of-way. I think the existing easement is 60 feet. Would the right-of-way be the same width?
It's going to be shown on the easement, or the exhibit, and the exhibit, it will, I believe.
And it will be the right-of-way of a...
Yeah, and we've talked about that, and I've got
Is it
that in
60 feet?
process, so I
60
think
feet.
by next Monday's
Yeah.
planning commission meeting, and then
Yeah.
ultimately your October town council
Yeah.
meeting, we'll have the exhibits. I think we want to show that exhibit showing the easement area, then also kind of a depiction of what that connector road may look like, obviously with the latitude that it would change upon final design.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
so we're talking about, we all are talking
Yeah.
about the same thing.
Okay.
Tyler confirmed it is 60 foot,
Yeah.
so it would be 60 foot right away, yeah.
Any questions, council?
And the council doesn't have to act or
Well, we
recommend
need to
this.
do
This was
anything.
more of a courtesy before it goes back to the planning commission for the final plat review, which is in similar form, other than a small change where there's a strip of land at it. Actually might be on there, but
No.
it was drawn on there. Yeah, and that was just for some signage, I think.
We've updated
Yeah.
that plat.
And we understand there's some challenges here. We don't dispute that, but, I think we're trying to do the best with what we can to make sure that the site can be redeveloped, and ultimately, all our problems will go away when this
Yeah,
happens.
and then again, and part of our agreement with the Hampton Inn developer is they're getting ready to spend tens of millions of dollars there. They want to be beside something that complements them, and so we have agreed on their project coming online that we will update our facade to complement.
Well, I'm glad you found a location for the Hampton Inn, because we're going to be losing revenue when they tear the other one down.
Yeah, and that's I think it's a little bit bigger, so and more modern, obviously, so it would hopefully generate as much or more revenue than it is now.
I'm looking forward to the improvements, and we thank you for bringing Hampton Inn back over on our side again, just like Ron said. Thanks.
And I think Steve pointed this out earlier, if this right here were to redevelop at all, and it would change the use, there would be restaurants put in there. I mean, that is when we would have to address the access to the entrance, and we've discussed that, and Steve's aware of that. But as it stands right now, as the shopping center, as it stands right now, at least staff right now is looking at it as a single use, as a shopping center. But any type of major redevelopment, that's when staff has to come in and analyze it and say, okay, what's the traffic impact? Because obviously a restaurant and certain
As I
uses.
understand it, if you leave it like it is, the traffic will not be increased over what it would be.
It shouldn't be. No, it shouldn't be. And if they build the Hampton Inn, then it would technically decrease the projected traffic if it were to be retail, and that's what he was,
Okay.
information he shared with the planning commission.
Well, I think it's left turns from that intersection that'll be a problem. We just have to address that when it becomes one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Stephen.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding RFP for pickleball courts. Mr. Moran.
Oh, am I starting this? Okay, so, I put something in my report last week, that I have Derek and Kevin here, I think Derek's gonna speak about it. Derek, why don't you just go ahead and just give a status update on it, and tell them, everybody where we're at now, which we should be in good shape, but.
Yeah, we advertised it on August the 18th, and we only got 2 bids back for the project, and one of them was actually a no bid. He didn't submit a bid, he just wanted to participate, I guess. The biggest problem, well, the first bid was way over budget. It was like 60,000 is what the bid, and we had 25,000 budgeted for it, so we rejected the bids, and then we re-advertised Friday, the 13th, so hopefully that works out. But we relaxed the schedule of the construction, which we thought was probably the big holdback on it, and we also added some more detail. We added like a picture to the RFP of what we're actually wanting to do, and I've got 3 responses so far from different firms asking questions about it. So the bids are due back on the 27th of this month, and hopefully we'll have some advantageous
And
bids.
correct me if I'm wrong, we did reduce the scope slightly by doing,
Yeah.
having the staff do a few things that were related to the improvements, like moving the basketball hoops, but
Yeah.
something that maybe they didn't want to mess with, so that's going to lower the price. Lower the cost.
What is the RFP for? Is it for 3 pickleball courts or?
It's for the total resurfacing, so it's a 24,000 square foot asphalt base up there at the Coombs Center, and we're going to resurface the entire base and seal the cracks. There's some cracks in it, repair the cracks, and then there's going to be the 2 tennis courts, which are already there, and then the 3rd tennis court is going to be utilized for 3 pickleball courts. We'll be turning the other direction.
They'll be
And-
painted.
Yeah, they'll be painted. And then on the far end, instead of it being a full-length basketball court, they're going to do 2 half courts basketball.
So,
Better utilize
because there
the
were other
space.
issues with the tennis courts, because there were lots of cracks in them, this was an opportune time to actually go in there and make those improvements at the same time. And then,
Well, I thought we were building one at the.
we are.
Community
Is
center.
that part of this RFP?
No, it's not part of this RFP, we're gonna do that in-house after we get this one done. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're hoping
Yeah.
that these bids will come in around like 18, 19,000, and then that'll leave us enough money to do.
So
what
if
we
I
need to do.
understand you, we're going to have 4 pickleball courts, is that
3 at the
correct?
Coombs Center and 1 at the community.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I thought we were just gonna have 3.
And so why are we waiting until this RFP is done? Because we're waiting on materials or something for the,
We need
build the
to,
other
we need to
one?
know how much is left over from these funds to know how much we'll have to allocate to the courts at the community center. The more we have, the more we can actually do over there.
Yeah. So we're looking, if we get enough money left over, then we're looking to do the versus.
The construction could be done very close together,
Yeah.
so that's why I think we're just waiting to see what happens with this before we know what to do over there.
That's it.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Thanks.
thank you.
Any questions, council? Okay. We'll be moving right along. Discussion regarding procurement procedures, Mr. Moran.
Yeah, this is gonna be a pretty short discussion because I'm gonna come back with another draft, but I was working with Cam on this and staff. I just want everybody to understand the issue that we have right now in our code is it looks like in previous years, what happened was they took the language directly out of the statute, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's what it looks like to me, and just kind of copied and pasted that into our ordinance. The law has changed over time, the threshold has changed, actually it's 80,000 technically and not 60,000, but we talked about doing 60, but we probably are gonna go up to the statutory, allowed 80 for the professional, but then actually lower the materials and supplies from 100 to 80, so we actually have to bid it out at 80, so it's the same. But the professional services is the kicker right now. It just says that all professional services must be procured through competitive negotiation. So if you were doing a contract for $5,000, you know, the law, further down in the statute, it says we can do it up to 60 or 80,000 now. And so our hands are kind of tied, because if we want to do a small project, we would have to go through and, you know, go through a process every time to do a very small professional service contract. That's just one of the issues. That's the major issue that's been an impediment to staff moving forward on some things. So that was one of the things we're trying to accomplish. There'll be a more comprehensive rewrite of this after we do it, but we're trying to get this thing at least addressed now, so we can at least get some things moved forward. And I know the RFP that we have out right now for the construction, the professional services, for the engineering services, that will actually help us move forward on some of these projects as well. And that one is due. Is Derek still here?
Yeah.
Okay, when is that one due?
It's due this Friday, I believe.
Is it this Friday? Okay.
Do
And
you
that'll.
do you think you'll be ready for the August 1st meeting with this, the October 1st meeting with this?
Oh, with the, I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think so.
I know, I'm getting a little bit antsy about not getting some of this
Right.
stuff that we allocated.
Right,
money for
right,
going,
right,
so,
right. We'll just have to pull everybody together real quickly, but I think that was the hope.
Yeah, I mean, we've
Yeah.
got the basis of it
Okay.
put
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
All right.
That's, so at a future committee meeting, I'll send you a distributed revised draft of that before we have to have a public hearing before we do any kind of ordinance change anyway, so.
All right, thank you. Matters not on the agenda, any matters not on the agenda? Anybody wants to say that?
I
Oh, go ahead.
First, Ms. Patterson had asked me a while back, and it might have came from another council member as well. And we talked about this at the planning commission meeting, about having a map as we've going through this overlay district zoning map amendment, or, I'm sorry, zoning text amendment. And we talked about the idea about having a map, and we all agreed that it would be very helpful. We did, and I don't remember if I emailed this out to everybody or not, I can't remember, but this is a map of essentially the parcels that would be covered by the corridor overlay district. But the way our ordinance is written, it just designates the streets, as we all know. But because this is sort of, you know, it's kind of spread out in 4 different areas, I think it makes it very difficult for us to adopt a separate zoning district map for this. So Jason and I, our recommendation is to essentially use this as a resource. If a property owner or developer were to come in or say, hey, look, you know, we were looking to either do something here or buy property in this location, we would show this to them and say, well, here's the entrance corridor. And this is reflective of when we make the change, right, Jason? This is not the current ordinance. This is the proposed termini based on what is going through the process right now, which the council will consider at the October 1st meeting. And so show this to them. Here are the parcels that currently are adjacent to the arterial roads, or the ones that we've identified in the car. So that was the point I wanted to make, was we were not going to adopt this. We're not recommending that we adopt any official map as part of the ordinance, because it's very difficult. We have to get into creating different zones, and I think hopefully this can just be used as a guide and not create a whole nother piece of legislation to adopt this map, especially if parcels change and they get subdivided. So I don't know, do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay. Jason, do you have it? Okay.
Josh, any comment on that?
Yeah.
I just wanna thank you for working on
Oh,
this.
sure.
Appreciate it.
It's handy. Yeah. And we'll make this available. We can put it on the website or something, so when the ordinance gets approved.
Said you had 2?
Oh, yeah, thanks, it reminded me. Holiday, we had been discussing internally with staff and human resources. She approached me about changing one of the holidays, swapping a holiday. We have, is it the Lee? Is Jackson Lee Day? I'm new to Virginia. Lee Jackson Day. And it's on a Friday prior to
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King Day. And it ends up being a 4-day, and quite frankly, our employees aren't that productive those weeks, so this is not. So we kind of kicked it around to some of the departments and asked what the preference was. I didn't really have a preference, but there was a consensus to have not Columbus Day, Good Friday off. And that way we would not have those 4 days off in a row with, having a 4-day weekend. And so the county actually does that, I believe. I was told. Do you know if the county has Good Friday off?
We do have
Good Friday off,
We
yeah.
have both of them.
Yeah, you got both of them, that's true. But the county has Good Friday off, so the thought was, instead of adding a new holiday, we would just swap those two. So that's what I propose that we do. So I don't think anybody has an objection to that, but I just wanted to bring that up before we implemented the holiday calendar for next year, so, yeah.
Every day's a holiday for me.
Yeah. That's true, you're retired every day.
Will that involve a change in the employee handbook?
We actually have it will, but I think we have Stacy creates a calendar of all the holidays too that accompanies that. So she's already made a revision to that, yeah, so.
Okay, council, anybody else have anything on matters not on the agenda? Okay, next item is report from council and staff. Anybody want to make a report? Nobody wants to make a report, okay. Moving right along, appointments to boards and committees, we're gonna need a closed session for that, I think. And we're also gonna need a closed session to discuss the county matter.
Do it both at the same time.
Mr. Bradley?
I move that the town council convene a closed session to discuss the following as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7, consultation with legal counsel or another matter regarding advice of counsel regarding a letter from Washington County also, and as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, a matter involving consideration of application for appointments for positions on the small business incubator.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bradley, we're in closed session for all those reasons.
Second.
Second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
Mayor Craig.
Okay, we're in closed session. We'll take a few-minute break. I think Al needs to.
Yeah.
Care of some-
I know when you.
look here now. Okay, is there a motion, we go back into open session?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Patterson to go back into open session,
Second.
second by Mr. Bradley. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye.
Okay, I have to do certification.
Okay,
I move that the town certify that in the closed session just concluded, nothing was discussed, except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Mr. Bradley, do you so certify?
I so certify.
Ms. Quetch?
I so certify.
Mr. Webb?
I so certify.
Ms. Patterson?
I so certify.
And Mayor Craig?
I so certify.
We may have lacked a second for anybody second her.
Oh, you didn't have a second? Second by Derek. You want to vote again?
No, I think it's
Okay.
fine.
You want us to vote again?
No, I think it's fine, sir, for that.
All right, the first item we're going to take up is appointment to the incubator. Do we have a motion on that?
I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Ben Abel to that committee, Small Business Incubator.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quetch to appoint Ben Abel to the incubator board, second by Mr. Bradley. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is the one that we put off, and let's see, I'm going to call how it says, discussion regarding referring courthouse, I'm sorry, I can't see what that one was. Referring consideration of a proposed text amendment to add courthouse as a permitted use in the B2 General Business District to the Planning Commission. We're going to have a presentation, or a discussion by Mr. Boswell first.
And of course, before we start, as I've done before with this matter, I have a personal interest in this transaction. And Code Section 2.2-3112A1 says that if a council member or employee has a personal interest in a transaction, he or she may not participate on behalf of the town in the transaction if the transaction applies solely to him, the company for which I and my wife work.
Thank you. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor Craig.
Can you say who that is and the address, so it makes me feel better?
What's that like?
Say who it is in the address.
Oh, Derek and Rebecca Webb?
No, your employer
Corporation.
and its address.
Well, I work for Food City, but my wife works for KBAT, mother company, so.
The address.
Oh, the address of the company, 1 Food City Circle, Abingdon, Virginia?
Thank you.
Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, council. I was asked by Mr. Moraney to kind of give an overview of the comprehensive plan process, how that relates to zoning, and how it all relates to the courthouse. Comprehensive plan is a plan for the physical development of the territory within the locality's jurisdiction, and it provides a guideline for future development and systematic change reached after consultation with the experts and the public. The comprehensive plan is a product of the state statutory scheme that assures that these changes are not made suddenly, arbitrarily, or capriciously, but only after a period of investigation and community planning. A good comprehensive plan should function as a policy document to be used by local leaders, yourself, when making decisions and when taking local actions. One example would include requests to change zoning of a particular parcel of land. In this instance, the plan can be very important to uphold zoning because it leads our locality in the administration of all land use regulations. The comprehensive plan should be one of the key sources, if not the key source, of guidance on every legislative zoning decision. The Town of Abingdon Comprehensive Plan 2027 designates areas for various types of public and private development and uses, more specifically the location of the courthouse. The town's future land use map specifically designated Courthouse Hill District. The town's zoning ordinance mirrors the plan by referencing courthouse specifically as a permitted use within Old and Historic Subdistrict 4. It is my opinion that the zoning ordinance was drawn with reasonable consideration for the comprehensive plan. Virginia Code Section 15.2-2280 is the key enabling statute that establishes the scope of the zoning power over uses, structures, and areas of use. It authorizes a locality to regulate, restrict, permit, prohibit, and determine the use of land, buildings, and structures. Per Virginia Code Section 15.2-2281, a county has jurisdiction over all the unincorporated territory in the county. A city or town has jurisdiction over all the territory within that municipality. Although planning processes may be extraterritorial between counties and towns under Virginia Code Section 15.2-2281, a locality's zoning authority is limited to its own territory. The state statutes I've just referenced give the county authority to regulate and permit uses where the governing body so chooses with regard to and reasonable consideration of the adopted 23 city plan. The council, at the time of the adoption of the plan and zoning ordinance, chose to omit courthouse from the B2 district. I can only presume that the council included courthouse as a specific permitted use in the Old Historic District intentionally. I would imagine that they considered the effects of relocating the courthouse from downtown and the impact that that may have on the historic district, as well as the impact of placing a courthouse in a commercially zoned district. And then, as another note, I'd like to add that the next public forum concerning the comprehensive plan update for the land use and transportation section is scheduled for September 30th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Community Center of Abingdon, located at 300 Senior Drive.
I have a question, Jason.
Yes, sir.
If we make this text amendment, it would apply to all B2 zones,
Yes,
is that
sir.
correct? And that would mean a courthouse could be built in any
B2
B2
district?
zone in town.
Yes, sir.
That seems to me to be somewhat absurd. Why would we change our zoning ordinance to allow a courthouse to be in any B2 zone? Does a courthouse belong in a B2 zone? I mean, that doesn't.
In my opinion, sir, no, it does not. Taking, in this instance, the Kmart building just off the tax roll itself, I think is a
So you
mistake.
don't, the bottom line is our zoning ordinance is based on a comprehensive plan that went through a process like we're going through right now.
Yes, sir.
And we're being asked to arbitrarily change our zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
That seems to be the case.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I understood. Okay, thank you. Any questions, guys?
Are you into this area? Another time?
I'll do it, but you.
Yeah, no, that's, I thought you were gonna talk about that.
Okay,
Can't miss something.
oh, Kim, you want to speak?
Yes, sir. I wanted to give everyone an overview. There are lots of things that have been flying back and forth and lots of decisions made recently. So as sort of a background, I'd like to give a timeline of how these events have unfolded as they relate to the town. On August 1st, 2019, Town Center of Abingdon LLC filed an application for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance of the town to add courthouse as a permitted use in the B2 General Business District. On August 14th, 2019, Washington County requested by letter a determination from the zoning administrator that courthouse is a use permitted by right within the B2 zoning district of the town. A day later, August 15th, 2019, the Town Center withdrew its text amendment application in which it said, our text amendment application was simply to clarify that the specific use, that specific use of courthouse and is not, a zoning text amendment was not required at the time. You recall the last work session that we were in, there was an application that that the council was to consider, and it was withdrawn during that meeting, and the reasoning was the county has requested a determination that public offices are included in B2 and the courthouse fits within the definition of public office. In turn, Town Center said we had asked for a zoning text amendment to the ordinance, but we don't think that that's necessary because courthouse is a public office, so that text amendment application was withdrawn. On August 23rd, 2019, the town zoning administrator replied to the county's request for a determination with the determination that courthouse was not a permitted use within the B2 general business district. On September 3rd, Washington County as the applicant and Town Center as owner filed a separate and additional application for zoning amendment to add courthouse as a permitted use in B2. September 3rd, that same day, I can't recall whether the timing of that same day when these happened, but on September 3rd, 2019, Town Council resolved unanimously that it opposes the relocation of Washington County Courthouse to the former Kmart site and supports renovation and expansion of the existing courthouse facilities, and listed many reasons supporting that position. On September 6, 2019, the town's attorney wrote a letter to the county stating that there is no authority for the zoning administrator to act upon an application for zoning text amendment from a property owner, nor authority to require the planning commission to act upon such an application. That letter dated September 6th, I discussed this zoning ordinance 17-4. That provision currently states if in any district established under this ordinance a use is not specifically permitted and an application is made by a property owner to the administrator for such a use, the administrator shall refer the application to the planning commission, which shall make its recommendation within 30 days. If the recommendation of the planning commission is approved by the town council, the ordinance shall be amended to list the use as a permitted use in that district. As I explained in that letter, and you all have seen it since, that municipalities act only through the authority that is granted to them by the state legislature. The state legislature has a statute that says for zoning text amendments, which are essentially amendments to the ordinance of the town, those can only be initiated by process by a resolution of the council itself or upon a motion of the planning commission for the council to consider an amendment of the ordinance. And that makes sense. You're the governing body. That would be a legislative act, in essence, to amend the ordinance itself. What this ordinance suggests is that there is any owner can initiate a process on his own to go through the zoning administrator, through the planning commission, and to the council that is all mandatory, which is contrary to the procedure that can be initiated only by the council itself or by the planning commission by state statute. So my opinion is that this ordinance is not enforceable. It goes beyond the scope of what the legislature has allowed the council to do. That is not to say, and I have not said, and I don't think the council has said, that the council or the town staff or me are telling any citizen that they're not able to come speak in public comment. They're not allowed to talk to Mr. Boswell. They're not allowed to talk to Mr. Morandi. If people have ideas to suggest to the town, then they're welcome to go through the proper channels to suggest those things. What I'm saying is that the ordinance as it's written says that there is a mandatory process that goes beyond the authority that is granted to us by the state legislature. So in that letter, I said that I didn't think it was enforceable in that way, but that council would take this issue up at an upcoming meeting. I wrote this letter September 6th. This is the next meeting that council has had. Mr. Morandi has some of the details of the notice of that meeting, but the county was informed that it would be taken up at an upcoming meeting, and agendas and the like were sent to the public as everywhere else for you to consider, and that's what we're considering now. As you know, given this timeline, the town staff and the town council have already considered whether courthouse is a permitted use. Mr. Boswell has already opined that it is not, or that it should be added as a permitted use in the B2 General District. Council has already resolved that it is of the opinion that the courthouse should stay where it is within the old and historic district. It's already passed a resolution opposing a move of the courthouse where it is properly zoned. In addition, an amendment to add the courthouse to the B2 General Business District would be contrary to the town's comprehensive plan, which Mr. Boswell explained. it doesn't seem to me that the county and the town center's application for zoning amendment changes any of the analysis that has already been completed on multiple levels, from the staff to the council itself, and legal review. In addition, this current application is contrary to what the town center said when it withdrew its application before. It said before, we don't need to amend the ordinance because it was already, the courthouse was already a permitted use. And then it resubmitted essentially the same application after it said it wasn't needed. So for all of those reasons, I think as background, it's not procedurally proper for the zoning administrator to follow this procedure stated in section 17-4. It also seems to me that going through that process would be futile, given the council's public statements and past unanimous resolution on the subject that the courthouse remain where it is. And of course, I don't have a vote. Mr. Boswell explained from the staff's standpoint the planning and zoning issues that he has researched and addressed.
Let me ask you a question, Cam. We had during the last work session of town council, was that the withdrawal of the same text amendment? The county, or somebody, I guess maybe it was Mr. Spangler, withdrew the text amendment application at the last work session. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now they're submitting the same?
Technically, the county submitted this application as the applicant, as a prospective landowner, and the town center also signed it as owner. But the application itself and there's an addendum to it answering some zoning questions are identical to the prior one that was withdrawn.
Well, that doesn't make.
Mayor Craig, ma'am?
No, ma'am. We don't allow the public to speak during our meetings. That seems highly unusual. I don't get that.
Right. It's inconsistent with what had happened in the past. It was applied for. The county sent a letter seeking a determination that courthouse was already allowed, and the town center said that all it was seeking in the text amendment was to clarify that courthouse was already allowed in B2. But once the decision was made, this additional application was submitted, asking for the thing that was asked for before.
And the county is doing this with knowledge that the town council has already, for what it considers to be valid reasons, made a decision contrary to what's being asked for. That makes no sense to me.
It was submitted before.
In the zoning determination from the.
Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Well, it defies reason.
Ma'am, you're out of order.
We can answer the question pretty quickly, the questions that are raised.
Excuse me?
It was me, I spoke.
Stephen, we're deliberating now.
That's really just a side point.
Okay.
You know, the main point is what has been.
I just wondered if you knew anything.
I don't know any background other than what happened. It seems contradictory to what had happened, but the application before being withdrawn and then being resubmitted. But that really a side point. What is before the council today is to consider whether it wants to act upon this amendment to amend the zoning ordinance or refer that to the planning commission for some determination.
Okay, does the council members have any questions you just
I just want to, could you repeat one more thing
Yes, ma'am.
clearly on the application? You mentioned something about the second application was submitted by the Board of Supervisors or the county.
By the
Could
county.
you repeat that again? So, and who signed it?
The county is the applicant of the text amendment application, and the town center of Abingdon LLC signed it as owner.
But the county administrator, I believe, signed the application on behalf of the county.
Right.
I believe, yeah.
Do you know when they entered into the agreement of trying to get the property? You know, was that, I'm thinking it was sometime in August.
I don't have that in front of me, but that's my recollection, yes.
Okay.
That's when it was passed by the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, anything else, council? What's your pleasure on the matter?
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor Craig.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to move that the council acknowledge, number one, the council acknowledge that neither a property owner nor prospective property owner can apply for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to add a permitted use, and those parties cannot require referral of the proposed text amendment to the planning commission. And number two, council not refer the issue to the planning commission of whether courthouse should be added as a permitted use in the B2 general business district. And number three, council not amend the zoning ordinance to add courthouse as a permitted use in B2 general business district.
Motion by Mr. Patterson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bradley. That motion is in written form.
It is, sir.
Pass it to clerk, please. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Abstain.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
Mayor Craig.
Aye. Okay, council, we're adjourned.